Hello everyone, welcome to this new topic that is nothing but resource quota and limit range. Okay, this is very important actually. We need to definitely understand this because how we can manage the resources, how we can manage the limitations, and how many number of resources we can create in each and every namespace. All those things is very important to understand over here. Otherwise, if there is no proper management of the resources, then all the teams cannot work simultaneously on the single cluster. So that's where this resource quota and limit range topics is one of the important topics in the Kubernetes. Okay, so you already might have heard about the namespaces, which are nothing but virtual cluster within the cluster, and those are required because let's say there are two different teams, Dev 1 and Dev 2, and they want to work on their different type of development, and we don't want their teams to damage or to disturb other the resources which are created by the other team. So that's where what we can do individually, we can create a dev1 namespace and provide access of the dev1 namespace to a dev1 team. And similarly, we can create dev2 namespace and provide access of that namespace to the dev2 team. Okay, so that they can create their resources in the respective namespace. They will not be able to do the bad things or hamper the uh, another's I'm to say different teams resources. So that's where namespace comes into the picture. And if you want to really learn the namespace into the great detail, I have already created one separate video for that matter. I'll share the link in the description so you can refer that as well. Okay, so mainly here we are going to discuss about the resource quota and limit range. So what is the problem associated with it? Let's say what if we don't have resource quota and limit range? Okay, so first we will talk about the resource quota and then we will talk about the limit range once we are done with resource quota. Okay, so let's say this is our worker node. Okay, I'll name it as worker 1, and within this worker node we have namespace, let's say dev namespace. Okay, there are other namespaces as well, like if you want to see which all different types of namespace we have, you can just check. Like we have default dev is the one which I have just created. Let me delete it. I'll recreate it one more time. And we have cube node, cube public, and cube system namespace. Okay, so different types of resources are created under each namespace, and definitely we are going to create some custom namespace for our practical demo. Now let's say this is the worker one node, and we have multiple namespaces like default namespace, then cube system, cube public, and leads. And those are the namespaces which comes by default whenever you are going to create a cluster. Okay, and what if we have to create a new namespace? Let's say I have just created it and give it a name as, let's say, dev namespace. And definitely let's go ahead create a pod within it. So let's say if I go ahead and create a pod in the dev namespace, okay, and if I don't provide any resources like how much uh, RAM it should use, how much CPU it should use, if I don't mention anything related to that, then this pod is free to use all the resources which are available on the worker node. Okay, let's say if this worker node is having 4 CPU and 16 GB RAM, then if this pod requires that much amount of resources, then in that case pod can consume all the resources over there. And let's say if that is the case, pod has consumed all the resources which are available on the worker node, then definitely new pod will not get created because to create a new pod definitely we need some resources, and if it is not available on this worker node, then it will not be able to create on this worker node. It might be get created on some other worker node where we have free resources. Okay, but it's always good practice to give some restriction to the pod, like how much RAM and how much CPU that pod should use, and we should set some low limit and higher limit so that pod consumption of the resources will not go beyond the higher limit which we will define. So that's where we call it as a resource quota. Okay, means resource quota for that namespace. We define resource quota on top of the namespace. We don't give resource quota to the pod. Okay, we have to provide resources to the pod, and we have to assign resource quota to the namespace. So let's do things in practical so that whatever we have discussed so far, you will get to understand much more easier way once we do each and everything in practical way. So what I will do, I'll go ahead and check which all namespace we have, and let's create a dev namespace. You can create any dev namespace, it doesn't matter. It should be dev only. It's up to you what which one you have to create. So let's see, is it created or not? So I can see a dev namespace got created successfully. And if you describe to this namespace, then you can see there is no resource quota and no limit range. So that's where I was talking about that resource quota we have to apply on the namespace level. Okay, and if I create any pod within this dev namespace and there is no resource quota, so that pod maybe we can use pod can use all the resources available on this worker node. Now let's go ahead and create a pod with some resources because uh, by default, if you don't provide, then as I told you, it is going to make use of all the resources. So what I will do, I have certain code available on my repository. I'll share this link of this repository to you. This is the public one, so you can go ahead and make use of it definitely. Let me go to the Kubernetes and then resource quota.yaml, and let's assign some resource quota to my namespace. Okay, I'll just copy the code, resource quota.yaml. I'll say pod. Okay, what exactly it is, let me explain. There are two types of the resource quota. Okay, one is like resource related one, which I have shared, like how much RAM and CPU that namespace will get, and one is like quantity related, like how many pods are allowed within this namespace, how many config maps are allowed within this namespace, how many deployment. So that kind of things we can also mention in case of resource quota. Okay, so this is nothing but I mean to say quantity based resource quota in which I am providing a hard limit to this namespace dev. Okay, this is going to apply to the dev namespace, and name of the resource quota which I am providing is like my resource quota, and hard colon pods colon 2. It means maximum within the dev namespace two pods are allowed, not more than that. This is the hard limit which I'm setting. Okay, so I hope you got the point now. Let's go ahead and save it. Let's apply this resource quota to the dev namespace. Now, if you just describe the namespace dev, you will see this output. And this is the like pods 0, 2. What does that mean? As of now, I don't have any pod in the dev namespace. That's where used equal to 0 and hard limit which I have set is 2. So let's go ahead and create a pod kubectl run my favorite image nginx, and I'm going to create it in the dev namespace, and let's describe this dev namespace one more time. Now you can see one is used because pod p1 I have just created in the dev namespace, and hard limit is 2, so I can create max 2, not more than that. So I'll create one more just to show you a demo p2, and kubectl get pod hyphen and dev namespace. I have both the pods up and running. And now if you describe to this namespace used and hard now same, it means I cannot go ahead and create furthermore. If I try to create, I'll definitely get an error, and you can see for the pod p3 I got this forbidden issue because it's exceeded the quota, my resource quota. Okay, so this is how a resource quota we can use to define how many pods we can create within a particular namespace. And second type of the resource quota is like a resource related. So let me go ahead and create that resource quota as well. Okay, so I'll just copy this code. I'll explain it definitely. I'll create one more file, resourcequota1.yaml, and paste the code. Okay, so I'm giving a name resourcequota1 in the dev namespace and request.cpu and request.memory, limit.cpu and limit.memory. What does that mean? Each and every pod, whenever we provide some resources to that, so we provide in the request and limit basis. Request is nothing but a lower limit, and this limit is nothing but higher limit. Okay, so if I show you the code related to the resources assigned to the pod, okay, this is the pod related code over here, in which I am providing some resources to this pod. So you can see request equal to this. Let me close this and increase some font so that you will get better understanding. So request is 100 CPU and limit is like 200 CPU. So lower limit is 100, higher limit is 200 millicore. So whenever this pod will get created, it will have 100 millicore, and if the load on the pod will increase, then maximum CPU it can reach to the 200 millicore, not more than that. This is nothing but restricting certain resources allocation to the pod. Okay, so this is how we can assign it. Same goes for the memory as well, like how much maybe byte we want it in the request and how much maybe byte we want into the limit. So lower limit is 100 and higher limit is uh, 200. It's up to you, or it's up to your project how much resources does that pod require. Okay, based on that you can provide it over here. So similarly, the resource quota which I'm creating, this resource quota will be applied to a dev namespace, and the request.cpu max is like 500 millicore. And let's forget it for the memory right now. Let's focus on CPU, because if you understood one parameter, CPU, then definitely same is the case for memory as well. So request is like half core and limit is like one core. So this entire dev namespace will have all the pods till the time this I meant to say this requirement is satisfied. Means it will not have uh, pods which is like exceeding the request.cpu and limit.cpu. So instead of explaining like this, let me share some practical with you so that things will be much more clear. So let me, I think I already copied the resource quota related code. So let me save it and apply it. Resource quota 1.yaml, and let's describe the namespace as we have applied this one more resource quota on the dev namespace, and that's where this is as of now. Like I do have pods within the dev namespace, but resources are not allocated to that when it was created. So that's where we have 0000. So what I will do, I'll delete the previous resource quota, and so that I can explain the new resource quota, which is the resource based in proper manner. So I have deleted the previous one. So that's where you can see only the one which is currently applied. And let's delete on the pod P1, P2 as well from the dev namespace. And we are going to create pod one more time with some resources assigned to it. Okay, let's create pod.yaml and copy paste the code related to this pod. Okay, the same thing, like I'm creating pod P1 in the dev namespace and with this resources. Apply it. Pod got created. Let's see if it is created or not. I have done the control C. Okay, I haven't deleted any pod right now. Not into the default namespace. I'm interested into the dev namespace, and let's describe the dev namespace. As you can see, uh, whatever the resources that was allocated to the pod are showing up over here. Like if you just focus on to the CPU, 100 millicore was the request and 200 millicore was the limit. Okay, if I create one more pod, then the total will be like 200 millicore will be the request and 400 millicore will be the, I meant to say, limit. Okay, or what I'll do, I'll change it to this 2 and 4 so that I don't have to create much pod. So what I'll do, I'll create one more pod with new resource and request over here. Okay, before modifying it and applying it, what I'll do, just to explain in well manner, I'll just copy these things. This is for the pod P1. Okay, now for the pod P2, let me update the resources one more time. Let's say this, say 3, and let's say this it's 5. And let's go ahead and create a pod P2. Okay, let me copy paste, apply it so that pod P2 will get created into the dev namespace. And once it got created, let's see the status. Okay, this is also up and running, and let's describe the namespace. Now these numbers got changed. Used hard limit is set as it is. Now these numbers got changed to something else. So how this got came over here? So let's focus only on the CPU right now. So for that matter, these were the resources for the P2. Okay, so now total is like 100 millicore plus this 300 millicore CPU request. Okay, so total will be 400 millicore CPU request. Okay, let's focus on CPU only. CPU, like lower limit is like 400 and higher limit is like 200 plus 500, that is the 700 millicore. So lower is 400, higher is 7. So that's what it is mentioned over here. Request is 400 and limit is 700. Okay, and if I create one more pod within the same namespace with the same resources, definitely it will not be allowed because request.cpu for the for my pod request.cpu is like 300, and currently if you see, this is like if I add 300 to this, it will become 700, which is higher than this 500. So hard limit we have set is 500. So definitely a new pod will not get created with a current resources because that will violate the resource quota, which is not allowed. Okay, so that's why resource quota is much more important, because I don't want a single team will make use of all the resources available on the worker node and another team will not get any resource. So for that matter, resource quota is definitely helpful. So I'll just simply change the name of the pod. I'll keep the resources as it is and apply it, and you can see this used is like 700. So definitely this will not work because the resource quota which we have set is now violating if you will create few pods over here. Okay, so that's what I was trying to say over here. I hope you understood it. And one interview question over here you can consider is very important to understand. Like once you apply the resource quota to the namespace, then you must have to follow, I meant to say, this syntax. Like let's say if you assign a resource quota to the namespace and if you try to create a pod without providing any resources, then a pod will not get created. I'll show you in practical. Let's see if I just try to create kubectl get pod hyphen and dev, and let's try to create pod p3 without any resources. Okay, I created this in the dev names, no, sorry, into the default namespace, which is not I'm interested in. I'm interested into the dev namespace. So you can see pod p3 is forbidden because of this resource quota. My resource quota must specify limit CPU, limit memory, request CPU, request memory, because It's like you have 10 liter of the car tank, means fuel tank, and if you are not aware how much you have put earlier, then how you will come to know how much is left and how much you have to put it later to fill the tank. Okay, so it's the same matter, like you have provided certain resources to the, or you have provided certain limitations to the namespace, and definitely we have to go ahead and follow that. That's where, like, every time you specify resource quota to a certain namespace, in that case you must have to provide resources to the pod. Okay, otherwise if you don't provide, then as you know, like if you don't provide any resources to a pod, then it can make use of all the resources on the worker node, and which violates the description of the resource quota. That's where it will not be allowed to create a pod without any resources. And if you really want to do so, then definitely a limit range will come into the picture. Okay, so what I'm talking about, let me delete certain pod p1, p2 from the dev namespace, and now let's say I want all the pods that to be created with these resources. Okay, let's say this request.cpu and this limit is like 100, 200. I want all the pods to be created with these resources, and I have applied the resource quota as well. So what I have to do, let's say if I create pod1 dot pod.yaml, so I have to add this code into this pod.yaml, then only pod will have these resources. So let's say there are 100 pods I have to create with the same resources. So definitely I have to add this code 100 times within the YAML file, right? And that will be the duplication of the resources. So that's where a limit range will come into the picture, that if you don't provide any resources while creating a pod, then by default resource will come from the limit range. Okay, let me show you practically, then things will be much more easier. As we saw earlier, like we are not allowed to create pod without providing any resources. Okay, we have to provide resources once you apply the resource quota. Now let's create pod. I meant to say limit range. Okay, let me go to the limit range.yaml file. These YAML files definitely I'll share with you. Let me copy the code related to this. Okay, so the name of the limit range is my limit range. It will get applied on the dev namespace. And this is the thing, like let's say now you want to create, let's say if I apply this limit range and later you try to create a pod without providing resources, then these are the resources that will get applied to that pod by default. Okay, so that is the important thing over here. We don't have to duplicate this resource related things in each and every pod.yaml file, because all those things will come from this limit range. Okay, and we can define certain minimum level as well, like let's say you have created this limit range, and still, and whatever the resources are all available over here, you don't have to go with these resources. You want certain things new, so you are free to provide resources to the pod, and those resources that you are going to provide will get applied. Okay, so it's not like you must have to provide. If you don't provide, then these are the highlighted resources allocated to the pod. If you provide, then that will get assigned to the pod. And you can define some minimum, like a pod must have minimum 10 millicore and maximum 300 millicore. It should not have more than that. So you can have this kind of limitations as well. So deeper you go, definitely you will learn some granular level of things. Okay, so let me save it. So if you focus on only the CPU, like 100 is the request, 200 is the I meant to say limit, higher range, save it, apply it, describe namespace dev. So this is the resource limit which we just have created, And minimum is like just focus on this CPU. Minimum is like 10, so pod must have 10, not less than that. If you try to create a resource, if you try to create a pod with 5 millicore, then that pod will not get created. Maximum is 300, and let's say if you don't specify anything, so pod will get 100 and 200. So let's go ahead and create a pod. Do we have any pod as of now? No. Run p1 nginx and dev namespace. So you can see pod p1 got created earlier. It was not getting created because of the resource quota. And how much resources allocated to this pod? If you want to see, just describe this pod and you will get a result. You will see over here that limits are like 200 and 100. So I hope now you understood the difference between limit range and resource quota, when to use the limit range and when to use the resource quota, and why do we need it. And I hope things are pretty much clear now with the practical. So thank you so much for watching till the end, and if you have any doubt, feel free to comment in the comment box. And if you want to learn Kubernetes from very scratch, I have created a different playlist day by day where I have explained each and everything in great detail. So thank you so much for watching. See you soon. Take care. Bye bye.